The deep hum of the ship's engines filled the bridge of the horizon as Diane Miller leaned closer to her communications panel. Something strange had caught her attention. An unusual pattern hidden within the normal static of deep space. She adjusted her headset and focused on the mysterious signal. "Captain Walsh, I'm picking up something odd from Sector 7, she said, her fingers dancing across the screen to isolate the signal. Captain Peter Walsh looked up from his reports and walked over to her station. He was a tall man with kind eyes that had seen 20 years of space exploration. "What kind of signal, Miller?" "I'm not sure, sir. It's not like anything in our database. It seems to be repeating in a pattern that suggests intelligence rather than a natural phenomenon." Science Officer Andrew Collins moved to join them, his curiosity piqued. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the console. Miller nodded and Collins studied the waveform patterns. A small frown formed on his face. "Something wrong, Collins?" Walsh asked, noticing the change in his expression. Collins hesitated. "I'm not certain, Captain. Something about these patterns reminds me of research I read about theoretical communication methods of advanced civilizations. There's something almost familiar about it." Walsh considered this information. The horizon was supposed to be mapping an unexplored sector of space. Finding signs of intelligent life would be an incredible discovery. "How far is the source?" Walsh asked. "About half a day at maximum speed, sir," Miller replied. Walsh nodded decisively. "Plot a course, let's investigate." Collins looked troubled. "Captain, perhaps we should report this to command first? Protocol suggests—" "We're a research vessel, Collins. Investigation is what we do," Walsh said with a smile. "Besides, the signal could be gone by the time we get approval." As the horizon changed course, Eric Matthews stood silently at his security station. Unlike the excited chatter from the other crew members, the former Special Forces officer watched the proceedings. With careful eyes, something about the situation made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. 12 hours later, the horizon slowed as it approached the signal's source. The bridge crew stared in amazement at the main view screen. "My God," whispered Captain Walsh. A massive ship hung in space before them, at least 5 times the size of the horizon. Its design was unlike anything humans had created. Smooth curves and angles that seemed to defy normal engineering, with surfaces that shimmered with a faint blue light. "No response to standard greeting protocols," Miller reported, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Keep trying all frequencies," Walsh ordered. "Collins, what are we looking at?" The science officer was already hunched over his console, running scans. "Definitely artificial and powered. Material composition is unusual. Some elements I can't even identify. No obvious weapons that I can detect, but their technology is clearly far beyond ours." Walsh took a deep breath. "This is it, first contact." Just as he spoke, Miller straightened in her seat. "Captain, they're responding." The view screen flickered and changed to show a humanoid figure. It had pale blue skin, large eyes without pupils, and a slender build. When it spoke, its mouth didn't perfectly sync with the words they heard. "Greetings, explorers of Earth. We are the Vecturians. We welcome peaceful contact with your species." A stunned silence fell over the bridge before Captain Walsh stepped forward. "I am Captain Peter Walsh of the Earth vessel Horizon. We are pleased to make your acquaintance." The alien figure made a gesture that resembled a bow. "I am Ambassador Zoltek. We have been studying your transmissions for some time and have learned your languages. We would be honored if you would accept our invitation to visit our vessel for cultural exchange." Walsh smiled broadly. "We would be delighted, Ambassador." As arrangements were made for a delegation to board the alien ship, Eric Matthews approached the captain privately. "Request permission to join the boarding party, sir," Matthews said quietly. Walsh considered him. Matthews was skilled but not usually eager for diplomatic missions. "Any particular reason, Officer Matthews?" "Security protocol suggests the first boarding party should include a security presence, sir." Walsh nodded. "Fair enough. You'll join myself, Collins, and Dr. Martinez." 4 hours later, the delegation boarded a shuttle to the Vecturian ship. As they approached, they could better appreciate the enormous scale and strange beauty of the alien vessel. It's incredible, Dr. Sofia Martinez whispered, her medical scanner already collecting data. The outer hull seems to be partially organic in nature. The shuttle docked smoothly with the larger ship. When the airlock opened, they were greeted by 3 Vecturians, led by Ambassador Zoltek. "Welcome aboard the Stellar Seeker," the ambassador said. "We are honored by your presence." The interior of the ship was just as strange as its exterior. Corridors seemed to shift slightly as they walked, and the lighting came from the walls themselves. The air had a sweet, unfamiliar scent. While Walsh, Collins, and Martinez asked questions and expressed amazement, Eric Matthews remained silent. His eyes constantly moved, taking in every detail. He noticed that despite the ambassador's claim that their ship was primarily for scientific research, the layout resembled military vessels he had encountered in his Special Forces days. He observed how the Vecturians always kept one member behind the human group, how certain corridors were carefully avoided, and how questions about their home world were deflected with practiced ease. The tour ended in a large room with a spectacular view of space. Food and drink were offered, and the scientists eagerly accepted, asking permission to scan the substances first. The Vecturians agreed with what seemed like amusement. "Your species is cautious." "This is wise," Ambassador Zoltek said. "We hope this is the beginning of a fruitful relationship between our peoples. We would be honored to continue our exchange with a visit to your vessel." Captain Walsh beamed. "Of course, we would be happy to reciprocate." It was then that Eric Matthews finally spoke. "That would be unwise, Captain." The room fell silent. Walsh looked embarrassed. "Officer Matthews, our protocol suggests completing full scans and research before extending such invitations," Matthews said calmly, his eyes never leaving the ambassador. The atmosphere in the room shifted subtly. Ambassador Zoltek's smile remained, but something in his large eyes changed. "Your caution is understandable but unnecessary," the ambassador said smoothly. "We come in peace." "Many do," Matthews replied quietly. It was all he said, but something in his tone made the Vecturians exchange glances. Captain Walsh quickly intervened. "Please excuse Officer Matthews. Security personnel are trained to be cautious. Of course, we would be delighted to have you aboard the Horizon." The moment passed, but Matthews noticed how the ambassador's gaze kept returning to him throughout the remainder of their visit. Back on the shuttle, Walsh was furious. "What was that about, Matthews? You nearly caused a diplomatic incident." "Something's not right about them, sir," Matthews said simply. "Based on what evidence?" Collins asked. Matthews didn't reply immediately. Finally, he said, "Experience." Walsh shook his head. "Well, keep your experience to yourself when they visit our ship. That's an order." Matthews nodded once. "Yes, sir." As the Horizon prepared to welcome the Vecturian delegation, Eric Matthews checked his sidearm and made silent preparations of his own. From that moment on, he spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. He became a shadow, watching and waiting. The Vecturians noticed his silence, and strangely, it seemed to make them nervous. The Vecturians arrived on the Horizon with gifts. They brought strange, glowing crystals that pulsed with soft light, devices that created three-dimensional images in the air, and food from their world that smelled like honey and cinnamon. The crew gathered around them in the main conference room, eager to see these wonders from another world. Ambassador Zoltek spread his long blue fingers over the gifts. "These are merely small tokens of what our peoples can share with each other. Technology, art, medicine, all can be exchanged between friends." Captain Walsh smiled broadly. "We are honored by your generosity, Ambassador." From his position by the door, Eric Matthews watched without a word. Since returning from the Vecturian ship, he had barely spoken. He stood with his back against the wall, eyes following every movement the aliens made. Ambassador Zoltek glanced at Matthews and his smile faltered slightly. "Your security officer seems concerned." "Please don't mind Officer Matthews," Walsh said quickly. "He takes his job very seriously." The ambassador nodded, but Matthews noticed how the alien's eyes kept returning to him throughout the presentation. Good, Matthews thought. Let him wonder. Later that day, Science Officer Collins examined the gifts in his lab. The crystals, particularly, fascinated him. They seemed to respond to touch, changing color when handled by different people. Incredible, he murmured, making notes on his tablet. The molecular structure reconfigures itself in response to bioelectric fields. He didn't notice Matthew standing in the doorway until he spoke. Have you seen these before? Collins jumped. You startled me. And what do you mean? Matthews walked into the lab and pointed at a pattern within the crystal. This design. It appears artificial. Collins looked closer. You're right, it's almost like circuitry, but more organic. Check our database for similar patterns, Matthews suggested. Collins typed rapidly on his console. After a moment, his eyes widened. That's odd. There's a partial match with artifacts discovered on Titan Base 3 years ago, but those were believed to be from a long-extinct civilization. Matthews nodded once, then left without another word, leaving Collins staring at the screen with a troubled expression. In engineering, Chief Engineer Laura Bennett worked with one of the Vecturian technicians. The alien, who called himself Krell, showed great interest in the ship's propulsion systems. Your fusion drive is quite efficient for its design, Krell said, his large eyes studying the engine schematics. Though you could improve output by at least 40% with some simple modifications. Really? Bennett was intrigued. What kind of modifications? As Krell explained, Matthews entered silently and stood watching. Bennett noticed him and frowned. Can I help you, Officer Matthews? Matthews didn't respond directly. Instead, he asked, What do you want to know about our weapons systems, Krell? The alien blinked slowly. I have no particular interest in weapons. You've asked about power distribution, shield harmonics, and engine response times, all relevant to combat situations. Bennett looked surprised. He hasn't asked about weapons, Matthews. Not directly, Matthews said, his eyes never leaving the alien Krell's skin seemed to pale slightly. I assure you our interest is purely scientific. Knowledge is precious to the Vecturians. Matthews simply stared at him for a long moment, then left as quietly as he had come. I apologize for Officer Matthews, Bennett said, embarrassed. No need, Krell said, his voice slightly higher than before. Caution is understandable. Shall we continue? But Bennett noticed that Krell seemed distracted after that, and kept glancing toward the door. In the medical bay, Dr. Sofia Martinez studied samples the Vecturians had provided of their biology. Under her microscope, she observed cells unlike any she had seen before. Fascinating, she whispered. Their cellular structure can rapidly adapt to different environments. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the door open. She only realized Matthews was there when he spoke. Compare them, Martinez jumped. What? Compare their DNA with the database of known species. Martinez frowned. Why would I do that? The Vecturians are the first alien species we've encountered. Matthews handed her a data chip. Are they? Puzzled, Martinez inserted the chip into her console. Files appeared showing genetic sequences labeled Classified Special Operations Recovery Mission 28B. Where did you get this? She asked. Lost colony on the edge of Sector 12. Everyone dead. Lab contained these samples from the attackers. Martinez compared the samples and gasped. There are matching sequences. How is that possible? They've been here before, Matthews said quietly. Then he left, ignoring her calls to wait and explain further. That evening, Captain Walsh called Matthews to his office. You're disrupting our first contact mission, officer, Walsh said sternly. Ambassador Zoltek has complained about your behavior. Matthews reached into his pocket and placed a small device on Walsh's desk. What's this? Walsh asked. Recording device. Found it in the conference room after their visit. Not standard issue for scientific research. Walsh picked up the device carefully. This doesn't prove anything negative. They could simply be recording for their own scientific purposes. Matthews handed him a folded piece of paper. Walsh opened it and read, "They're studying us. Note what they ask about. Note what they avoid." "What are you suggesting?" Walsh asked, his voice lower. "Ask them about their homeworld. Ask for coordinates. Ask how many other species they've contacted," Matthews said. Walsh sighed. "I'll pay closer attention, but I want you to stop harassing our guests. That's an order." Matthews nodded once and left the captain's office. Later that night, the Vecturians hosted a dinner for the senior staff. They served exotic foods and showed holographic images of what they claimed was their homeworld, a beautiful blue and green planet with 3 moons. During the meal, Ambassador Zoltek asked many questions about Earth, human society, and their military capabilities. Matthews noticed that when Walsh asked about the Vecturian home system's location, the ambassador gave a vague answer about it being many light-years distant. After dinner, as the group toured the ship, they passed through a security checkpoint. One of the Vecturians, a female named Tella, commented on the weapons storage protocols. "Your phase rifle charging sequences are quite efficient," she said casually. Chief of Security Paul Garcia looked surprised. "How do you know about our charging sequences? We haven't shown you our weapons systems." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Tella blinked rapidly. "I must have read about it in your shared database." "That information isn't in any shared database," Matthews said, breaking his silence. Ambassador Zoltek stepped forward smoothly. "We Vecturians have an intuitive understanding of technology. We can often discern how systems work merely by observing related systems. It's a gift of our species." The moment passed, but Matthews saw Captain Walsh's expression change. For the first time, doubt had entered his eyes. Later, as the Vecturians prepared to return to their ship for the night, Ambassador Zoltek approached Matthews directly. "You are unusually quiet for a human," the ambassador said. "The others of your kind speak freely, share readily, yet you watch and listen. Why is that, Officer Matthews?" Matthews looked directly into the ambassador's large, pupilless eyes. "Some hunt with noise, some hunt with silence." The ambassador's skin changed color slightly, turning a deeper blue. "Hunt? We are not prey, Officer Matthews." Matthews simply stared back, saying nothing more. As the Vecturians left, Ambassador Zoltek glanced back at Matthews one last time. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding that beneath the diplomatic smiles and friendly words, a different game was being played. A dangerous game, and Eric Matthews had no intention of losing. Diane Miller sat alone in the communications room late into the night shift. Most of the crew was sleeping, and the horizon was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment. She rubbed her tired eyes and prepared to log off when a strange signal caught her attention. The signal was brief and heavily encrypted, coming from the Vecturian ship. It wasn't sent on any of the channels they had established for communication between the vessels. Miller hesitated, then ran it through the decryption program. The computer couldn't translate the language, but it did extract some of the data files attached to the transmission. Miller's eyes widened as images appeared on her screen. Detailed schematics of the Horizon systems, biological profiles of the human crew, and what looked like military assessment reports. Her hand trembled as she downloaded the data to a secure drive. She needed to show this to Captain Walsh immediately. As she left the communications room, she didn't notice the shadow that detached itself from the wall and followed her silently down the corridor. In his quarters, Captain Walsh was awakened by an urgent knock. He opened the door to find Communications Officer Miller looking pale and frightened. "Sir, I need to show you something right away," she said, holding up a data drive. Walsh invited her in and reviewed the files on his personal screen. With each new image, his face grew more grim. "Are you certain this came from their ship?" he asked. "Yes, sir. The transmission signature matches their systems perfectly." Walsh nodded slowly. "Call an emergency meeting of senior staff in my ready room. Exclude our guests." 20 minutes later, the senior officers gathered around the table in Walsh's ready room. Security Chief Garcia, Science Officer Collins, Dr. Martinez, Engineer Bennett and Officer Matthews stood waiting as Walsh played the intercepted transmission data. This was sent by the Vecturians to their ship, Walsh explained. It contains detailed information about our vessel, our capabilities, and even our biology. Garcia frowned. This goes well beyond cultural exchange. It looks like they're analyzing us, Collins added, searching for weaknesses. Everyone turned as Eric Matthews finally broke his days-long silence. They're hunters, Matthews said, his voice rough from disuse. They find new species, study them, then take what they want. That's a serious accusation, Walsh said. Do you have evidence? Matthews nodded. 6 years ago, my Special Forces unit investigated a lost colony on Proxima B. Everyone was dead. We found records of friendly contact with aliens matching the Vecturians' description. 3 weeks after first contact, all communication stopped. The room fell silent as Matthews continued. We found other records there, star charts marking civilizations that had gone dark after similar contact. Always the same pattern. Always the same visitors. Dr. Martinez stood up. The DNA samples Eric gave me confirm part of this. The Vecturians' genetic material contains markers from at least 12 different sentient species. It's as if they've absorbed characteristics from each one. Why didn't you report this before? Walsh demanded. It was classified, Matthews replied simply. And I needed proof you would believe. Walsh ran a hand through his hair. We need to confront them with this information. They'll deny it, Matthews warned. They'll have explanations ready. At that moment, the door chime rang. Ambassador Zoltek stood outside, flanked by 2 other Vecturians. I apologize for the intrusion, the ambassador said smoothly as the door opened. But we detected unusual activity and wanted to ensure everything was well. Walsh struggled to keep his expression neutral. Everything is fine, Ambassador. Just a routine staff meeting. Zoltek's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the data displayed on the screen. Walsh suddenly moved to block his view. At this hour? The ambassador asked. It must be important. Ship operations continue around the clock, Walsh replied. Was there something you needed, Ambassador? Zoltek smiled. Actually, we were concerned about Officer Matthews. He seems to have developed quite an interest in us. We wondered if perhaps he was unwell. All eyes turned to Matthews, who stared back at the ambassador without blinking. Officer Matthews is performing his duties as assigned, Walsh said firmly. Of course, Zoltek nodded. We merely wished to offer our assistance. Among my people, prolonged silence can be a sign of psychological distress. Matthews took a step forward. Among mine, it's often the last thing predators hear. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The ambassador's skin darkened slightly, but his smile remained fixed. A fascinating cultural note, he said. We look forward to learning more about your species' survival instincts. Until tomorrow, then. After the Vecturians left, Walsh turned to the others. They knew we were meeting. They're monitoring us somehow. What do we do now? Garcia asked. We maintain the appearance of cooperation while investigating further, Walsh decided. Bennett, check the ship for any monitoring devices. Martinez, continue analyzing their biology. Miller, monitor all transmissions. Collins, review everything they've told us for inconsistencies. Matthews, I'll watch them, Matthews said quietly. As the meeting broke up, no one noticed that Officer Matthews didn't return to his quarters. Instead, he made his way to the armory, entered his security code, and began collecting equipment. The next morning, the crew was alarmed to discover that Matthews was missing. A search of the ship revealed no sign of him. Could he have left the ship? Walsh asked Garcia as they stood in Matthews' empty quarters. The logs don't show any shuttle activity or airlock use, Garcia replied. It's as if he just vanished. When Ambassador Zoltek was informed, he expressed concern. Perhaps the psychological pressure was too much for him. We have seen this in other species when confronted with beings as different as ourselves. What do you mean, other species? Collins asked sharply. I thought we were your first contact. The ambassador blinked slowly. A figure of speech merely. We have studied the psychological patterns of various Earth animals and extrapolated. Collins didn't look convinced, but before he could press further, Chief Engineer Bennett burst into the room. "Captain, someone's accessed the main computer. Core using my authorization codes," she said breathlessly. "The entire tactical database has been downloaded." Walsh's face hardened. "When?" "Last night, between 200 and 0300 hours. That's during our meeting," Collins realized. All eyes turned to Ambassador Zoltek, whose expression remained calm and concerned. "This is troubling news," the ambassador said. "Perhaps Officer Matthews—" "Don't," Walsh cut him off. "Don't try to blame this on my officer." Zoltek spread his hands in a gesture of innocence. "I merely suggest that his behavior has been erratic. We would be happy to help search for him." Walsh forced himself to remain diplomatic. "Thank you, Ambassador. We'll handle the search ourselves." After the Vecturians departed, Walsh gathered his remaining senior staff. "I don't trust them," he said flatly. "And I'm starting to think Matthews was right all along." "But where is he?" Miller asked, her voice worried. "Do you think they did something to him?" Walsh shook his head. "Matthews is too careful, too prepared." "You think he's up to something?" Garcia asked. "I think," Walsh said slowly, "that Matthews has been hunting his own prey, and I hope to God he knows what he's doing." On the Vecturian ship, deep in a restricted section that the humans had never seen, Ambassador Zoltek reviewed security footage with his officers. "The human male is missing," he said. "Find him. Now." "Could he have discovered the containment area?" one officer asked nervously. Zoltek's skin darkened with anger. "If he has, kill him, and prepare for immediate extraction. It's time to end this charade." What none of them realized was that a silent figure was already moving through their ship's ventilation system, placing small devices at key junctions. Eric Matthews had been planning this mission since the moment he first saw the Vecturian vessel, and he wasn't alone. Science Officer Collins worked through the night analyzing every piece of data they had collected about the Vecturians. He compared star charts, signal patterns, and communication logs. As dawn approached on the ship's artificial day cycle, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The timing of the Vecturians' arrival matched perfectly with a sudden, slight disruption in the Horizon's long-range communications with Earth. It was subtle, just enough interference to make their signals slightly degraded, but not enough to raise immediate alarm. Collins rushed to find Captain Walsh, who was in his ready room reviewing security protocols with Garcia. "Captain, they've cut us off," Collins said without preamble. "The Vecturians have been jamming our communications with Earth since they arrived." Walsh's expression darkened. "Are you certain?" Collins placed his tablet on the desk, showing the signal analysis. "The interference pattern matches emissions from their ship. It's designed to be barely noticeable but strong enough to prevent any meaningful communication." "So we're isolated," Garcia said quietly. Walsh nodded grimly. "And they're preparing for something." In the medical bay, Dr. Martinez worked frantically to complete her analysis of the Vecturian biological samples. What she discovered horrified her. The genetic material contained not just markers from other species, but entire DNA sequences that had been somehow integrated into the Vecturian's genome. Martinez pulled up old xenobiology research files and gasped at what she found. Some of the DNA sequences matched extinct species from planets now classified as dead worlds, planets where civilizations had mysteriously vanished. She activated the ship's intercom. "Captain Walsh, please come to the medical bay immediately. I've found something disturbing." When Walsh arrived, Martinez showed him her findings. "They're not just hunters, Captain. They're consumers. These DNA sequences suggest they somehow absorb genetic material from other species. It's like they're taking the best traits from each civilization they encounter." Walsh stared at the data in shocked silence. Then his communicator beeped. "Walsh here. Captain, this is Miller. The Vecturians are requesting an immediate meeting. Ambassador Zoltek says it's urgent." Walsh exchanged a look with Martinez. Tell them I'll meet them in 30 minutes in the main conference room. And, Miller, activate Security Protocol 7. Yes, sir, Miller replied, understanding the code for high alert. Walsh turned back to Martinez. Keep working. Find anything that might be a weakness. As Walsh left the medical bay, he didn't notice the small maintenance panel in the corridor slide open slightly, then close again. In the conference room, Ambassador Zoltek waited with 4 other Vecturians. Their earlier friendly demeanor had changed. They stood stiffly, their skin a darker blue than before. Captain Walsh, Zoltek said as Walsh entered with Garcia and Collins. We appreciate your prompt response. Walsh remained standing. What can I do for you, Ambassador? Zoltek's large eyes fixed on Walsh. We will be direct. Your officer Matthews has trespassed on our vessel. This is a serious violation of diplomatic protocol. Officer Matthews is missing, Walsh said carefully. If he's on your ship, we had no knowledge of it. Yet you do not seem surprised, Zoltek observed. Regardless, we have decided to accelerate our timetable. The horizon will now come under Vecturian protection. Walsh's hand moved slightly toward his sidearm. Protection from what exactly? From your own limitations, Zoltek said. We had hoped for a more gradual integration, but circumstances have changed. You will order your crew to prepare for transfer to our vessel. And if I refuse? Walsh asked, though he already knew the answer. Zoltek's mouth stretched into what might have been a smile. Then we will proceed without your cooperation. Our main fleet is already approaching. They will arrive within 12 of your hours. The truth was finally revealed. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. It was an invasion. Before Walsh could respond, the ship's emergency lighting activated, bathing the room in red. The Vecturians looked startled. What is happening? Zoltek demanded. Walsh's communicator beeped. Captain, we have multiple hull breaches in sections 12 through 15, reported a panicked officer. Some kind of boarding craft have attached to our ship. Ah, Zoltek said, his tone now openly predatory. Our advance team has arrived, earlier than expected, but fortuitous. Walsh, Garcia, and Collins drew their weapons simultaneously, but the Vecturians moved with surprising speed. 2 of them produced devices that emitted a high-pitched sound, causing the humans to drop to their knees in pain. Your species has such sensitive hearing, Zoltek commented as he took Walsh's weapon. Just one of many weaknesses we've identified. Through the pain, Walsh managed to speak. Why are you doing this? Evolution, Zoltek replied simply. We advance by incorporating the strengths of other species. Your kind has remarkable adaptability and problem-solving abilities. These will serve us well. Security alarms blared throughout the ship as more boarding craft attached themselves to the horizon. The Vecturian invasion had begun in earnest, but deep in the alien ship something else was happening. Eric Matthews moved silently through dimly lit corridors, followed by 3 strange beings. They weren't human. Their bodies were thin and graceful with iridescent skin. They moved with practiced stealth, communicating with Matthews through hand signals. They reached a sealed door with strange markings. One of the beings placed its hand on a panel, and the door slid open to reveal a large chamber filled with what looked like glowing pods. Inside each pod was a creature, some humanoid, some entirely alien. One of Matthew's companions touched his arm and pointed to a specific section of pods. Inside were beings that looked similar to his 3 companions, but also other species he had never seen before. Matthews nodded in understanding. These weren't just invaders, they were collectors, keeping specimens alive for study and experimentation, and his 3 companions were escaped prisoners. He motioned to them to begin the process they had planned. While they worked to release the captives, Matthews moved to a central control panel and attached one of his devices to it. A small light blinked green, indicating it was active. On the horizon, Zoltek was communicating with his boarding parties when his device suddenly emitted a harsh beeping sound. His skin paled dramatically. What is it? One of his officers asked. Containment breach on the main vessel. Zoltek hissed. "The specimens are being released." At that moment, the lights in the conference room flickered. The Vecturian devices, controlling Walsh and the others, faltered, and they seized the opportunity to fight back. Garcia tackled one of the aliens while Collins and Walsh went for the others. Throughout the ship, the crew of the Horizon fought against the Vecturian boarding parties. Though the aliens were stronger, the humans used their knowledge of the ship to their advantage, sealing sections and using emergency systems against the invaders. In engineering, Bennett had barricaded herself and her team. She received a strange transmission on her personal device, a series of codes she didn't recognize, followed by instructions in English. When ready, execute file vk override.exe. Stand by for ship-wide power surge. Matthews. Bennett's eyes widened. Matthews was alive, and he had a plan. On the Vecturian ship, chaos reigned as pods opened throughout the containment area. Beings of various species emerged, disoriented but quickly understanding their situation. The three aliens with Matthews organized them rapidly, using simple gestures to communicate across language barriers. Matthews checked his watch. In precisely 2 minutes, everything would change. He took one last look around the alien ship, noting key systems and vulnerabilities. Then he tapped his communicator, which he had modified to bypass the Vecturian jamming signal. "Matthews to Horizon," he said quietly. "Prepare for light show." In the Horizon's conference room, Walsh heard the message through his own communicator. Despite his situation fighting against the Vecturians, he smiled grimly. The human had been silent, but he had not been idle. In the engine room of the Horizon, Laura Bennett's fingers flew across her console as she uploaded the mysterious file Matthews had sent. The other engineers watched nervously as Vecturian boarding parties tried to break through the sealed doors. "Whatever this is, it better work fast," Bennett muttered as the door shuddered under another impact. The file executed, and strange code scrolled across her screen. For a moment, nothing happened. Then every light on the ship flickered simultaneously. The bridge communications officer Miller watched in amazement as her console came back to life, free from the Vecturian jamming signal. "We have communications back," she shouted to no one in particular, as the bridge was largely empty due to the fighting throughout the ship. She immediately began broadcasting a distress signal, hoping that Earth forces within range would hear it. Then she noticed something else. The Vecturian ship was experiencing power fluctuations. Massive surges of energy were coursing through its systems. In the conference room, Captain Walsh and Security Chief Garcia fought desperately against the Vecturians. Despite being outnumbered, they had managed to disable 2 of the aliens. But Ambassador Zoltek and his remaining officer had them cornered. "Your resistance is futile," Zoltek said, his skin now a dark blue that was almost black. "Our species has consumed dozens of civilizations more advanced than yours." Suddenly, the Vecturian devices they were holding sparked and went dead. The ship's lights surged brightly, then stabilized. Walsh seized the moment of confusion. He lunged at Zoltek while Garcia tackled the other alien. With their technology failing, the Vecturians found themselves matched against determined humans fighting for their survival. Walsh pinned Zoltek against the wall. "What's happening to your ship?" he demanded. For the first time, real fear showed in the ambassador's large eyes. "Impossible," he whispered, looking out the viewport at his vessel. "The human couldn't have understood our systems." Throughout the Horizon, the tide of battle turned. The Vecturian boarding parties found their weapons and communication devices failing. The human crew, fighting room by room, pushed back the invaders. On the Vecturian ship, Eric Matthews led a small army of freed prisoners through the corridors. Among them were 3 distinct species: the tall, iridescent beings he had first freed called the Noor, stocky, powerful aliens with ridged skin called the Tellarites, and slender, quick beings with golden eyes known as the Vosh. One of the Vosh, who had learned enough English to communicate with Matthews, explained their situation as they moved. "We are all that remains of our worlds," she said. "The Vecturians came to us as friends, learned our weaknesses, then attacked when we were vulnerable. How many worlds? Matthews asked as they approached the ship's central command center. 12 that we know of, the Vosh replied. They consume, integrate, and move on. Always the same pattern. The explosives Matthews had planted throughout the ship had caused critical damage to the Vecturian systems. Now, as they prepared to take control of the command center, he explained his plan to the freed captives. The Vecturian fleet is coming, he said simply. We need to send them a message. Inside the command center, they found only minimal resistance. The Vecturian crew was busy trying to stabilize their failing systems. With the help of the Tellarites' strength, they quickly subdued the crew. Matthews approached the main communication array. One of the Nor, who understood Vecturian technology, helped him access the system. Together they prepared to send a message to the approaching fleet. Back on the horizon, Walsh had subdued Ambassador Zoltek and secured the conference room. His communicator crackled to life. Captain Walsh, this is Matthews. Please respond. Walsh felt a wave of relief. Matthews, where the hell are you? On the Vecturian command ship. I have control of their communication system, and I'm not alone. Walsh looked out the viewport at the alien vessel. What do you mean? The Vecturians have been doing this for centuries, Captain. Taking prisoners, studying species, then invading. I've freed the survivors from 3 other worlds. We're going to use the Vecturians' own communication system to send a warning to their fleet. Walsh understood immediately. You're going to try to scare them off. No, sir, Matthews replied. I'm going to show them what they should be afraid of. In the Vecturian command center, Matthews worked with the Nor technician to compile a special transmission. It contained detailed information about Earth's military capabilities, but with specific modifications, all suggested by the prisoners who understood Vecturian psychology. The Vosh leader explained to Matthews, the Vecturians only respect strength and fear. They need to see humans as predators, not prey. Matthews nodded. That's exactly what we'll show them. He added to the transmission the security footage from the horizon showing how the humans had fought back against the boarding parties. He included data on Earth's nuclear arsenals and space defenses, carefully edited to suggest far greater capabilities than actually existed. Finally, he added something special, a compilation of humanity's most violent historical conflicts, showing the terrible efficiency with which humans had fought each other throughout history. If they're this brutal to their own kind, the Vosh said with a grim smile, imagine what they'll do to enemies. As they prepared to send the transmission, Zoltek was brought to the command center by Walsh and a security team from the horizon. The ambassador's confident demeanor had vanished. You don't understand what you're interfering with, Zoltek said, his voice shaking. Our fleet will destroy your world completely when they arrive. Matthews stood before the alien commander. No, they won't, because you're going to tell them not to come. Zoltek laughed bitterly. I would never betray my people. You don't have to, Matthews said. You just have to read a statement about how dangerous humans are, about how we're not worth the cost. Matthews leaned closer to the alien. And if you don't, I'll transmit the self-destruct codes we found in your ship's database directly to your fleet's command vessels. Zoltek's skin turned almost white. You're bluffing. You couldn't have decoded our security systems. A Nor stepped forward, holding a datapad with Vecturian text. We helped him. We know your systems better than you think. With no choice, Zoltek recorded the message. Under Matthews' watchful eye, he warned the fleet that humans were dangerous predators who had seen through their deception instantly, who had technology that could disrupt Vecturian systems, and who showed no mercy to threats. They hunt in silence, Zoltek said, his eyes darting nervously to Matthews. They watch, they learn, and then they strike without warning. Earth must be avoided at all costs. After the transmission was sent, Captain Walsh looked at the radar display. The approaching Vecturian fleet, which had been detected at the edge of their sensor range, slowed its advance. After several tense minutes, the ships changed course, moving away from Earth's solar system. Later, as the Horizon's crew worked to repair their ship and help the freed prisoners, Captain Walsh found Matthews on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. "How did you know?" Walsh asked. "From the very beginning, how did you know they were a threat?" Matthews was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Predators recognize other predators, Captain. I saw how they watched us. Too carefully, too hungrily. Real friends don't study you for weaknesses." Walsh nodded slowly. "Earth will want to thank you. The entire crew wants to thank you." "I just did my job," Matthews said simply. "Well, your silent approach certainly worked," Walsh said with a small smile. "When the humans stayed silent, the aliens should have fled," Matthews finished. "Instead, they got curious. That was their mistake." As they prepared to return to Earth with the alien survivors, who would serve as witnesses to the Vecturian threat, Matthews made one last entry in his personal log. "Humans aren't the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but we might be the most dangerous because we recognize danger and we don't hesitate to act. Today, we've shown the stars that when humanity is threatened, our silence isn't surrender. It's the calm before the storm."